we know the origin of Shushuta Samhita, where we have rhinoplasty that says, Shushuta said, you cut a flap of skin from the cheek or from the forehead, you fashion a nose for this person. He's given a procedure to do that. So this knowledge was transmitted to the Islamic world, Baghdad, 8th to 9th century, in the Abbasid Caliphate, House of Wisdom in Baghdad. They translated Shushuta Samhita, Charaka Samhita into Arabic, and this knowledge went through Arab scholars, Avicenna with Al-Razi, all these people. They integrated this into their works. It was transmitted to Europe, Sicily in 10th to 12th century, both in Toledo and in Sicily. And Arab medical works of Indian originals were translated into Latin. This was the basis of medical curriculum at the Salerno Medical School, Europe's earliest medical university, 11th century. They used only Shushuta's works, Charaka Samhita. They had no knowledge of their own. This is used over there. So this has gone into the so-called Renaissance, 16th century, Gaspar Tagliacozzi, if I'm pronouncing that right. He was a professor in the University of Bologna, and he authored this particular book, and he's exalted as the first European book exclusively on plastic surgery, and he describes reconstructing the nose using skin flap from the arm. He says, cut it from the arm over here, and let that skin be used for the nose, the way I'm showing it. And guess what? You can't remove your arm till that is completely healed. It's completely impractical. How would that person sleep or walk for maybe about a month or so? You're supposed to be like this. That is what is shown over here, right? This is supposed to be the very impractical way. Shushuta had one from the forehead or from the cheek. Very, very practical and so on. But anyway, this man is hailed in Eurocentric accounts as the father of modern plastic surgery. Do you see the pattern over here? It's a plagiarization, erasure, exaltation of Eurocentric sources, European sources, where Shushuta is forgotten over here. But here, with evidence, we can show you how did that knowledge go over here. This is a sample of what I'm going to do in the next few slides. Music. Many of you may wonder, why is this sa re ga ma pa da ni sa? Why is that related to do re mi fa sol la ti do? Why is it related? You might wonder that. As far as the West is concerned, the best they can do is music arose independently in India, China, and Greece. But my question is, why did they all get the same tonal differences between the major and the minor notes? Why did they all get the same? Is there something psychosomatic in the brain that we all chant on the same, converge to the same idea? Or is there a common origin? Anyway, there is something called psalmization, right? Where they position this guy, Guido of Arezzo. He developed new techniques for teaching and the use of ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, which is based upon some biblical hymn that they have. So the first letters in each line of the biblical hymn. He says that's what they used, and this was suddenly such a fantastic pedagogical method that they could teach music from there on. They positioned him as the person who invented these kinds of things. And the facts are, the Saptaswara system is there in very ancient Indian works, right from Rig Veda, let alone Samaveda. Right from Rig Veda, we got Saptaswara appearing over there. Thousands of years before Guido, Indians had phonetically abbreviated the Sajja to Nishada, which system that we have, as Sari, Gama, Pada, Nisa, right? We have got already abbreviated this. And if you look historically, the documented use of phonetic abbreviation Sarigama appears in works by Dattilam and Bharata Muni's Nati Shastra, at least 500 BCE, if not much earlier than that. And the transmission mechanisms are shown, Pythagoras, Greek travelers, Indo-Roman trade, Muslim transmission. So what we are seeing here, once again, erasure, usurpation, and plagiarism at work over here through the Eurocentric mechanisms that I said, how Indian knowledge goes there. Now we blindly accept it and say, yep, do re mi, without realizing where that whole thing came from. In the 5th century BCE, a Greek mathematician made a discovery that shattered the foundations of mathematics, right? And so they say this was this hypasis of this metapontum in the Pythagorean school of mathematics, where he showed what we call irrational numbers now. Just to quickly tell you, we got natural numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, whole numbers from 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. Integers, these are all different negative and positive integers. Rational numbers are these things with decimal points. Irrational numbers are things you can't express it completely in an expansion like pi, for example, is a recurring ratio. So here, this man has apparently found this phenomena For example, he said that hypotenuse cannot have a rational length if a certain condition is met over here. So he's talking about these things. Where is the reality? In Manava Sulba Sutra, which we can put to approximately 1800 BCE, he has provided several right-angle triples where he discovered square root of certain numbers like 2 and 61 cannot be determined exactly. What we call surds in our high school algebra comes from here, where he's talking about irrational numbers. He's provided triples for the right-angle triangle with fractional sides. He also approximated pi to these values and so on. So what we are seeing over here is we got a mathematical tradition in India that's already got some of these developments, but these are erased in casual Eurocentrism, where they only exalt the Greek sources. This is from Scientific American in September 2025, where it says physics as a field of knowledge has existed at least from the time of the Greek savant Thales in 600 to 545 BCE, right? So it talks about Thales of Miletus, who's called the father of physics. This is from a physics site, History of Physics. So you see this exaltation, self-exaltation, father of physics, father of medicine. All these things are given to the Greeks over here. What is the reality? Is it where it came from? Well, we can see what the Eurocentric sources hide about Thales. There is absolutely no original works of Thales available. Everything we know is second-hand, reconstructed from much later 9th century, 10th century, 11th century commentaries and so on. For example, it's attributed to him that everything is made of water from Aristotle. This is what Thales had said. What is the fundamental principle? Earth floats on water. Aristotle is repeating him. He imagined that Earth is resting on water like a log floating. He thought magnets have a soul because it attracts, moves iron and so on. And he also predicted an eclipse according to Herodotus and so on, based on probably Babylonian or Egyptian cycles. What we are seeing is a very primitive description. This is what they call as physics. When you say, why is Thales exalted for physics? These are the reasons, because he tried to understand the natural world in such a primitive fashion, and therefore he's called the father of physics. Okay, so this is the exaltation made about Thales. Now we go to Vaisheshika. In Vaisheshika, I have just taken from Major Basu's translation. I've just given you from the preface of the foreword, the table of contents. I've highlighted a few things. You can't read it from back there. In this, for example, when he's talking about investigation of action, okay, right there you see, it's a very, very scientific way of talking. Vaisheshika is all about pratyaksha anumana, which is perception and inference. It's a basis of scientific thought, where we build new truths on the basis of older truths based upon perception. Vaisheshika, Rishi Kanada is saying there are two kinds of perception, external and internal. He's saying external can be mistaken. For example, you mistake a rope on the road, on a poorly lit road at night, you think, oh, it's a snake. But then there's light there, you say, oh, there's only a rope. So external perception can be mistaken. He's saying perception through the mind, through reason and logic, that is a better form of knowledge. This is what we see. The basis of scientific knowledge is contained in Vaisheshika, and he's got chapters over here. In the absence of an impediment, a body falls from gravity. Right? So he's saying basically the cause and effect is contained in Vaisheshika. He's saying there's got to be a cause. If there's no cause, nothing can happen. This kind of cause and effect is the basis of our physics over here. You're seeing such an advanced thing over here. It does not go upward nor sideward because there is no impulse towards those directions, meaning that there's got to be a cause to change something. Then on nature and motion, movement springs from impulse, which produces impetus. And gravity destroys the impetus, the body falls. So saying even though you throw something up, gravity is pulling it back, and that's why it falls. You're seeing amazing physics knowledge in Vaisheshika Sutra itself. Anacalypsis by Higgins, where he's quoting the historians, Eusebius. He's saying that the people in Egypt came from the river Indus and planted themselves south of Egypt, and they crossed from the Red Sea from Arabia. Herodotus, another historian, who says there are two Ethiopian nations, one in India, other in Egypt. And where did he get the information from? From Egyptian priests. Philostratus, another person who says Gymnosophists of Ethiopia, who are settled near a Nile river, descended from the Brahmins of India. And one more person says the same thing. Now, why is this relevant? Remember, I told you 2000 BCE there was a monsoon failure in India, and Indians have gone out and settled in Nile River, in Euphrates River, and places like that. And these people have settled and shared their ideas over here. And these have percolated all the way down to these Roman historians' time. They've got a much better vantage point than us, because they lived 2000 years ago, these historians, right? So from that point of view, they're talking about the history, and this is what they're saying. So this is one set of evidences that I give. Another set of evidence is from Clement of Alexandria. He was an early Christian priest, right? This is from Christian writings. So he says, Plato does not deny he procured all that is excellent in philosophy from the barbarians, the pagans, Indians basically, that he came into in Egypt. And the barbarians honored their lawgivers. He's basically talking about the Brahmins over here. Philosophy was cultivated by the Brahmins. They were defied by the race of Egyptians, Chaldeans, Abrahamians, and so on. So now a second person from the vantage point of 150 BC, the current era, he is talking about Indians having settled there, and Pythagoras and Plato learning from these people in Egypt and repeating these things. So there are several allegations by Western historians of science on this, starting with the colonial era historians. They allege that advanced parts of Indian astronomy like epicycle model, trigonometry, mean motion tables were borrowed from Greco-Roman sources, especially Ptolemy's Almagest. This is a source of great consternation for the Europeans, because they presumed knowledge is the apex of, rather astronomy is the apex of knowledge for them. If the Indians have advanced astronomy, it's like it's not nice for the Western civilization. So they had to somehow show Indians have copied it from Ptolemy and places like that. So they claim that Indian texts like Surya Siddhanta, Aryabhatiya contain the same elements, epicycle, eccentrics. They look structurally similar to the Greek system. Therefore, Indians copied from the Greeks. Later scholars like Bentley and others, they allege that Indian Siddhantas were reworking of Greek astronomy brought into India around 500 current era. And the mainstream Western chronology puts Ptolemy's Almagest in 2nd century current era. Aryabhatta and the classical Siddhantas are dated much later to claim that Indians could not have influenced Ptolemy because these are later works. That's how they dated them. So the influence is the other way around. And this argument is used by them to dismiss ancient Indian astronomical references that appear to be much older. For example, Surya Siddhanta has got much things we can date from precision, using precision. So there are critics like David Pingree, systematically framed Indian astronomy is a derivative of Greco-Babylonian knowledge. Both Neubauer and Pingree set the stage to make such assertions that Indians have copied astronomy from the Babylonians, from the Greeks, and so on. And a common assertion is that translation that happened in Baghdad was a vehicle where in Baghdad, Greek works were translated to Arabic, right, Almagest, because the Muslims got hold of those things in where today's Damascus and other places are, they got these things. Indian works like Surya Siddhanta and Brahmagupta's works were translated into Arabic by Al-Fazari and others. And from there, they say Muslim cross-pollination happened. The Muslim scholars took Greek knowledge and Indian knowledge and they made these works, and therefore that is why it appears advanced. That is where they are saying Indian knowledge has come over there. And Western historians are alleged is not an independent tradition, but a secondary recipient of Greek knowledge in sciences. This is the way it is positioned, very, very unfortunately. But then we look at the facts. The first fact we ask is, okay, you're using Almagest. Where did the Almagest come from? What is the provenance of that? Well, the date is 150 current era, where he's supposed to have composed this work in Greek in Alexandria, but there are absolutely no surviving copies of that original work. In the 9th century, the earliest Greek manuscript was found in Byzantine. 9 centuries later, it is preserved in the Vatican today, that 9 centuries later. In 820 current era, there's an Arabic translation on this Caliph in Baghdad, where in the 9th to 10th centuries, there were revisions by further Muslim scholars over here. 12th century in Toledo, Gerard of Cremona, he translated from Arabic to Latin in Toledo. In 1451, this person, George, he produced a Greek to Latin translation. 1460, this very influential man, Regiomontanus, he prepared this summary of Almagest, which was hugely influential for all the colonial scholars. And 1538, this was printed after the Gutenberg printing press came about. It suddenly became printed and people started using these things. What are we saying? We are saying there is no original Ptolemy's work. Whatever was got was reconstructed in Europe in 1451, 1460 and those time frames when they've already got Indian knowledge from translations in Toledo. They're passing that off as Ptolemy's early works. That's what we're seeing here. Now, until the 15th century, Europe only knew Almagest through Gerard of Cremona's translation. Then this 9th century Byzantine Greek text became accessible in Renaissance. This George translation 1451, Regiomontanus in 1460 and the printed edition in 1538. So by the time the European Orientalists and colonial scholars in 17th to 19th century, when they were comparing Indian astronomy with Greek, their standard reference was this Renaissance era printed editions, much later ones. This is what C.K. Raju also has said. C.K. Raju's works, he has shown some of these things where he's saying this is how this happened. These original works are not there. These are reconstructed works that are done on the basis of inferiority complex of the Europeans, right? To show they have as superior knowledge of the Greeks and so on. So the question is, which version the critics rely on? It is not the lost original Greek manuscript. It is not the Byzantine Greek copies. They worked on the 1538 Basil Greek printed edition and Latin translations. This is what they worked on. What we study today in schools and universities is utterly wrong. These frameworks, the colonials, Eurocentric, missionaries, socialists, and the Marxists, they are controlling the historiography of India even to the present time. Thankfully, NCERT is finding its voice today, and the 6th grade has been corrected, and soon corrections will come for the other grades too. But it's taken a long time. 70 years is too long for this civilization to have waited. We have messed with generations of Indian students who have internalized Eurocentric ideas and notions, whereas erasing our own ancestors' ideas. This is a criminal act by the earlier NCERT chairman. Those guys should be put behind bars for their crimes against India. And we are seeing linguistic methodologies used to prop up the narratives of these guys. I've shown to you linguistic methodology does not align with evidence from many other fields, therefore it's falsified. We've seen antiquity in archaeology, genetics, astronomy in the text. We have very strong evidence to uphold antiquity of Indian civilization. And using evidence-based narration, we can discredit Aryan invasion or migration because this constrains Indian chronology to 1500 BCE. We urgently need to revise our education system.